Hello and welcome to my little bookish corner of the internet. My name's Harriet. Today I'm going to be doing my spoiler review of A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin, and this is the first book, Steel and Snow. So this book was split into two different books, and I have got the other one here as well. So originally they would have been a huge book and it would have taken me a very long time to finish it. But thankfully it was split into two, so I read it over 2 months, and I am going to be splitting this review into two parts as well. So I'll do a review of this, and then the next video that I upload will be for the second one, which is Blood and Gold. But today I'm going to be reviewing Steel and Snow. Now this is a spoiler review. I'm going to briefly recap what happened in the previous book, which was The Clash of Kings, and then I'll talk about what happened in this one and what I thought of it, how I got on with it. Now, if you somehow didn't already know what this series is about, so this book is part of the A Song of Ice and Fire series. It's technically book 3, as is the next one, which I'll review as well, but because it's split into 2 books, this is the third one for me and the next one will be the 4th. It's all very confusing. But yeah, this is basically a fantasy series. It's very high fantasy and there's a whole load of things going on. We're basically set in this world, and there's these 7 kingdoms where most of this is set, and then you've got King's Landing, and basically that's where the Iron Throne is, and the person that sits on the Iron Throne basically rules the whole of Westeros and the 7 kingdoms. So it's set in this world, and there's just a lot of political intrigue and really interesting things that are happening. There's a very strange magic system as well, and different kind of magical and mystical creatures. So it's quite intense. If you aren't the biggest fantasy lover, I really don't think that you would enjoy this series at all. But if you do love fantasy, I think you'll love it. So I've made some notes because I don't really remember what happened in the second book. It's been a couple months since I read it now. This review is a little bit late. Obviously I finished the other book already before I'm filming this, so I did have to make some notes, so just bear with me. Okay, so basically at the end of The Clash of Kings, we are left in just this crazy sticky situation. If you want to see what I thought to the previous book and the first book as well, and you kind of want to know a little bit more about where the story started and where it is now, I'll leave a link down below to the playlist, and I've got all of my Song of Ice and Fire series reviews on there, so you can check that out first. So I think the easiest place to start with would be to tell you that Joffrey sits on the Iron Throne, and Joffrey is basically the illegitimate heir to the Iron Throne. So it is assumed that he is the son of Cersei Lannister and Robert Baratheon, and Robert Baratheon was the old king. Now he's dead, so he's long gone, he's been gone for a while now. And Joffrey's taken over, but it actually turns out that Cersei Lannister and her brother Jaime Lannister have had many children together, so there's quite a lot of incest going on. They are apparently very deeply in love, but no one is to know this, and basically Joffrey is their son. So he is illegitimately sat on the Iron Throne. Now Stannis Baratheon, who is Robert Baratheon's brother, he knows about this, and he's basically been trying to claim the Iron Throne because by right it is actually his. But then there's a whole load of other kings that are basically trying to take over the Iron Throne, so it's a bit of a sticky situation. And basically Stannis decides that he wants to make that move to basically take the Iron Throne. So at the end of the book there is a Battle of Blackwater, and basically Stannis sails in with all of his allies to try and take King's Landing, but he fails. Now he doesn't die, so he's still alive, but he is kind of pushed back and harmed in a way that he needs to kind of recuperate, and he's lost a lot of his troops as well. Now one of the other people that was trying to claim the Iron Throne, called Renly, he is murdered, so he is no longer in the Game of Thrones, basically, he's gone. And he was murdered by, they say it's Stannis Baratheon's shadow. Now Stannis has recently been kind of dipping his toes into some witchcraft. He does that through a red woman called Melisandre, and she's almost like a vessel for the Lord of Light, who is this lord that seems to have this otherworldly power. Don't know too much about it just yet. I just know that he does exist and he has got magical powers. So yeah, Renly was killed by Stannis' shadow, and that brings someone else into the story, and their name is Brienne of Tarth. They were basically a guard or a knight for Renly, and after Renly's murder, everyone assumes it was either her or Catelyn Stark who murdered him. You aren't going to know these people unless you've watched my other reviews, so maybe check those out. I've just realised. I'm just going to be like throwing names everywhere. Brienne and Catelyn leave the camp together where Renly was, and they disappear, and they also capture Jaime Lannister, who is the dad of Joffrey. Now Catelyn's son Robb, he is fighting for the freedom of the North. He has been named the King of the North, but obviously the Lannisters do not want him to have that. They want complete power over the whole of the 7 kingdoms. So Robb is fighting all of these battles, and he isn't actually at home, so he does lose his home, which is Winterfell, and it gets taken over by Theon Greyjoy. He used to live with the Starks, so it's like a massive stab in the back. And supposedly in doing this, he actually kills Rob's younger brothers, Rickon and Bran, but it turns out they're actually alive. He didn't kill them at all, he just killed some random kids. So he did still kill someone, but it wasn't the Starks. And then their sister Arya as well. She's basically fighting for her life. She fled King's Landing after they cut off her father's head in the first book, and she's been running ever since and just trying to stay away from the Lannisters. But she runs into all sorts of trouble with other factions and different clans and kind of people that don't really belong to any clan. They're just really violent and thieves, you know, murderers, rapists. So it's all very intense for her. And then we've got Tyrion, who's the brother of Jaime and Cersei. He's a dwarf and he gets caught up in the Battle of Blackwater at the end because he is the hand of the king. So he kind of fights for the king because King Joffrey is honestly just a bit of a wetty. So Tyrion gets caught up in the Battle of Blackwater and he gets attacked by one of the Kingsguard. So it turns out that that person was basically set onto Tyrion to try and kill him, and Tyrion assumes that it was by his sister Cersei because they just never got on. But thankfully he lives. He's just severely mutilated. He's missing like a chunk of his nose, he's got a massive scar on his face, and where we leave this book he's just KO'd. And then we've also got Jon Snow, who is one of the Stark's bastards, and he's sent to the Wall to protect the North. But actually it turns out that he's going to have to infiltrate the wildlings, which are the wild people that live outside of the Wall in the North. So he has to kill some of his brothers of the Night's Watch, which is really horrible, and then infiltrate the wildlings and try and become one of them. And that's where he meets Ygritte. And then we've also got Daenerys, who is trying to claim the Iron Throne because her father was murdered, and he was the king. He was murdered by Robert Baratheon. There was like a rebellion against him because they called him the Mad King. They thought that he wasn't worthy of ruling the Seven Kingdoms, so they killed him. But now Daenerys is the only survivor of the Targaryens, as far as we know, and she's trying to come back to the Seven Kingdoms to take back the Iron Throne. So that is where we're left in A Clash of Kings. There's a lot going on, loads of information. As I say, if you want to find out all about all of these characters, you can watch my previous reviews. And now we get on to Steel and Snow. So I found that this book was kind of like a setup for the next book, which is actually the second part to this one. So there was a lot of kind of plot points that were planning out the story and getting the characters to where they needed to be ready for the next book, which was just filled with action and craziness. There was stuff going on everywhere. But in this book, we've still got the four kings which are trying to fight for the Iron Throne. And then we've got Daenerys Targaryen as well, who is also trying to travel into the Seven Kingdoms to take over the Iron Throne. And so much happens in this book, it's absolutely crazy. But again, it's not so action-packed compared to the last one. So there's a little bit more kind of political intrigue and setup for the characters being where they need to be in order for the story to progress. Now in this book there is a lot more talk of the Others and the Whites, which are basically this magical being or race of people, and they can only be killed if they get stabbed with something called dragon glass or obsidian, and that is really hard to come by. It's kind of like an old magic. They are infiltrating through the north and then they're going to move up into the south where the Iron Throne and all that is, the King's Landing and everything, and they're basically trying to take over and kill everyone, take over everything. So there's a lot of darkness in this book, and again a lot of setup. And our characters are very scattered as well, so we get to see a little bit of every part of the world that this is set in. I found that really interesting, the landscapes and just how George R.R. Martin came up with all these different places is spectacular and so interesting. Now these books do have maps in the front, but personally I don't use them because I just find it even more confusing. And I don't feel necessarily that they would be something you need to use, but it's all down to personal preference, I think. So I won't talk about many of the plot points in this video, I'll talk about it briefly in the start of the next review. But overall, I found it really interesting. There was so much political intrigue in here, and I actually think that this is one of my favourites out of the series. I did really like the first one. The second one I loved, but not as much as the first, and then this one I loved more than both of them. But then I read the next part, and if this had been like a complete novel altogether, it maybe would have made it to one of my favourite books of all time. But this particular part of the novel, as I say, it was more of a setup. It didn't feel like a filler though. All of the pages and all of the words felt necessary, so that was really good. And I found it really interesting. I did like to see all those different sides of the characters. I'm really enjoying Jon Snow's kind of, his way of thinking and the way that he infiltrates the wildlings and kind of the way that he changes in the book as well. He has infiltrated the wildlings within this novel, and he does actually end up sleeping with a woman called Ygritte, who's one of the few people that actually put their trust in Jon almost immediately. So they have a really strong connection, but obviously she is a wildling, and because he is one of the sworn brothers of the Night's Watch, he's not actually supposed to take a woman. So he is definitely breaking his vows with her, but their relationship was really lovely to read. And unfortunately at the end of the book, he does have to abandon her and he returns to the Night's Watch. And that was really hard to read because obviously he's leaving her and it was really horrible. I found that it was more interesting to read than it was to watch in the show. And I actually really liked their relationship in the show as well. I just think that it was done a little bit better in the book. There's more time that you get to spend with those characters as well. Honestly, I could probably read a book dedicated to just John's storyline if there was a bit more of it. Each chapter of this, if you didn't already know, is split into the different characters. So you don't get to meet all of them in every book. Some books are different to others, and some books you'll spend more time with other characters. This one, for example, felt quite heavy with Arya's story, but we did also get to spend a lot of time with Jon, who is obviously one of my favourite characters, and we also got to spend a lot of time with Tyrion Lannister as well, and we got to see his kind of relationship with Shay, who is, as written in the book, she is his whore that he's basically brought out to spend time with, but she is not allowed to be around him when he's near his father because his father has forbidden it. So yeah, all in all, a really good book, really interesting. It obviously got a 5-star read for me. I just think that it's great. It is a bit of a commitment, this series. It's taking me a little while to read, but I am really enjoying it so far. And yeah, if you want to see my reviews for the second part, that will be up in a couple of days, so definitely watch out for it. But that is it from me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!